Welcome to Beyond the Flight Deck podcast with United Airlines pilot and investment advisor Alan Bewley, who will take you behind the scenes with airline pilot entrepreneurs, academics, and other professionals. And now, your host, Alan Bewley.
Miles Morgan has been an aviation enthusiast his entire life. A chance meeting with a young flight instructor put him on the path to becoming a pilot for United Airlines. Today, Miles is the Managing Director, Flight Training. We talk about the career that's led him to his current role, the challenges with such a busy and large training center, implementing procedures like check path, and yeah, the rumors are true, flare briefings are on the way. Welcome Beyond the Flight Deck. Captain Miles Morgan, Managing Director of Flight Training, United Airlines. Welcome Beyond the Flight Deck. Thanks for sitting with me.
Thanks, Alan. Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. Hey, let's dive in real quick. Talk a little bit about who Miles Morgan is, where you came from. Just give us the quick and dirty, where you grew up, siblings, what your parents did for a living, maybe how you got interested in flying.
I was a small boy in so believe it or not, I was born in New York City. I don't remember much about that. Spent the first 3 years there before going to upstate New York. And I mean, as far removed as from New York as you could be from a perspective of busyness. It went from New York City to Millerton, New York, we were 20 minutes outside of Millerton, which is a town of 2,000 people. So really, really remote. But one of the first pictures I have of myself is sitting on my dad's shoulders at the observation deck at LaGuardia, watching United 727s, roaring in and out. And apparently that's all I wanted to do, was that and chase around the trash trucks around New York City. So it was either pilot or garbage associate, which actually that probably is not a bad career, but I decided to go with plan A. And I kind of always wanted to be an astronaut. That was the thing. I remember playing hooky from school to watch the space shuttle launch and things like that. And then I found out that, one, I'm really tall and it'd be hard to be an astronaut at that time. And two, you had to be a military test pilot, and that was not going to be my path. So I wanted to start flying at a pretty early age. There was really nothing that drove me to that from my family perspective. My dad was a photographer, freelance photographer. My mom just worked at a plant science building as an administrative assistant, and it just was something I wanted to do. So my mom gave me a flying lesson on my 16th birthday up at a tiny little strip in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And I did that. And I got to the point where I soloed at 16, but I was not emotionally mature enough for that. I found out I just did not have what it took to be able to do that. So I quit flying for a while, went to the University of Vermont for college, thought I was going to ski race. Wasn't nearly good enough to be on that team. They were really, really good. Yeah, I'm sure. And so then I started getting back into it at Burlington Airport. I started fueling airplanes and washing airplanes, and really got fascinated. Started flying again. Paid for my flying lessons with the work at the FBO. Got my private, and then decided I was going to go to Embry-Riddle. So transferred down there, and that was sort of how the career took off. Yeah. And your degree in Riddle. Bachelor of Science, Aeronautical Science, the standard flight degree there. Yeah. Okay. All right. So real quick, graduated high school, your high school yearbook, Miles Morgan was most likely to be a dork, I think. Okay. I mean, that's pretty standard, and that nothing's changed, and it's still the same as I think if I had a superpower or an Achilles heel, it'd be empathy. It's maybe my biggest strength and my greatest weakness all at the same time. So maybe somebody would have said something about that in the internet. And I will say my daughter, who's 5, just started kindergarten. She was named the first kindergarten student of the week. And one of the things they pointed out was, they circled on her thing was empathy. And empathy. I'm like, okay, if nothing else in my life, I'm proud of that. Yeah. Pass that on to her. Yeah. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. All right. Very good. And out of Riddle, you flight instructed? What was your flying path to United between Riddle and United? Yeah, so I was an intern my senior year, and actually, quick story which has a bit of a sad ending. But when I had no idea about how to get into aviation. So when I was washing airplanes up at Burlington, a guy came in. This kid comes in, and he's going to interview for a flight instructing job. And at the time, it was late 80s. There weren't a lot of jobs out there. And so he was just a really nice guy, and he saw me kind of working, and we got to talking a little bit, and he said, hey, when he finished the interview, he said, let's go to lunch. I said, okay. His name was Flip Wilson. So we went to lunch, and he started talking to me, and he said, do you want to be a pilot? And I said, yeah, I really kind of do. And he said, well, let me just give you a little advice if I can. He said, you want to go to Embry-Riddle, you want to graduate at the top of your class, and you want to get an internship at United Airlines. And that's your path. He said, look, I'm interviewing it, here for a flight instructing job, but I'll have an interview at United here in the next 6 months, and I expect to go there. And so I said, okay, called my dad, and I said, hey, I want to go to Embry-Riddle. He said, what's that?
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know. I hear it's a flight school. And he said, well, has United or American ever heard of him? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, call him up. So I called up Embry-Riddle, and they're like, yeah, we've heard of American and United.
We are the
So he said, well, I think it's a colossally bad idea. I think you should go get your degree in physics that I was studying. And but he said, I'll go down there with you. So we went down, and so anyway, I ended up on that path, and I took Flip's advice, and did pretty well at Riddle, and ended up at the United internship, which I did at Chicago, working for Mr. Hart, Captain Hart, Hart Langer. And I then got hired at United, and I'll kind of go back to that in a sec, but I went and looked. I wanted to tell Flip that he had not only changed my career, but had changed my life. Like the course of my life will be forever different because of that one conversation I had. And he had been hired at United, was flying 727s for United. Unfortunately, he was killed in an air show accident. I never got a chance to thank him, which I'm really sad about to this day. But so that was kind of the trajectory changer for me. So after college, I went and I scrapped together a flight instructor job at Orlando Exec. Really ragtag outfit. I think there were 8 of us flight instructing, 6 of us. There were only 2 of us that have not had an accident. It was just that time of, that time. From there, I got hired at a company called Dolphin Express, flying Jetstream 31s down to the Bahamas. They had 2 Jetstreams. Their head of maintenance was more interested in the owner's daughter than he was in fixing the airplane. I made $9,000 that year that I worked for them. We all 6 pilots at the airline slept on the floor. One gal she had a kid, so she rented an apartment in West Palm Beach, and we all just rented from her and slept on her floor and flew back and forth to the Bahamas. And
holy cow!
From there, I got picked up at Atlantic Coast Airlines, flying Jetstreams for them, and worked for them for a little bit, and then got hired at United in March '95. Wow! Been here ever since.
Yep, you're exactly 1 year ahead of me. So, very good, interesting. At what point in your career did you start into the training environment?
Well, good question. I became a check pilot about a decade ago. I don't remember the exact date, but I was a check pilot on the Airbus first. And then when I decided to, the Airbus 737 after the merger, seniority got a little funky. And so I switched over to 737 and became a check pilot there as well. So that was kind of my first foray into training and checking at United. And that's sort of where I expected it to stay. Honestly, I had no intent. I mean, I was a line pilot for 26 years. I had no intention of doing anything other than that. And then 3 years ago, things just changed, and things got a little different in my career. So
So you started out on the bus as a check pilot, and then the 7-3?
Yep. On the bus, I did that for a while, and then I lateraled to the 7-3, just a straight seniority play. The bus was kind of stagnating. 7-3 was growing, so I moved over and then became a check pilot on the 7-3, and ultimately a QCL on the 7-3 down in San Francisco.
Okay. Talk for a second about the difference between a LCP and a QC. LCP.
Yeah.
You hear that phrase a lot, but what's entailed? What do you have to do to get there?
There's not much that you do from a training perspective. You do an extra brief with the FAA. It's an extra designation on your letter. And on the 7-3 and the Airbus, and most fleets at United, that you you do a couple of different duties. So one, as a QCL, you're sort of a quality control line check pilot. And your job is to, if an LCP needs a QC check, so after 6 months and after 24 months, we give a QC check to LCPs that are conducting OE, so make sure that they're teaching things correctly, and so the QCLs conduct those events. If a LCP needs a regular line check, which we still do regular line checks, a QCL has to conduct that event as well.
Okay.
QCLs do all of the line check pilot training in the airplane. So when a new line check pilot comes through the schoolhouse, and then they're going to go out and do the right seat training and the C2 do to before they go out and solo with a new OE pilot, that's all done with a QCL. And last thing, on the Airbus and the 737 at least, we have a designation called PCA ILI, and that extra I is for initial observations for captains. So we do that on behalf of the FAA. So, and that's done, sometime during OE to ensure that new captains have good command leadership.
Yeah. And that's who did mine back in 2007 as an Airbus. Yeah. Was the United guy. Yeah. All right. So from the LCP, QC, LCP world, you move into standards at some point. Is that the next move? And so tell us about that transition and what you did there.
Yeah, I did a short stint in standards, just due to the reorg of our structure. But so I was living in Portland, commuting to San Francisco, and my wife was from Southern California, moving to Portland. We had a little kid, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't like it here. This is." And I was gone a lot, and it was during COVID, and I was actually flying a lot during COVID because I was training people on the way down, right? So they were getting bumped. And she just wasn't happy. And I said to her, well, I said, I'll move, but I want to be home more for my kid. So I'll move, but I'm only moving to a domicile. Yeah. So you pick a domicile that we have, and I'll move there. And if you want to go back to SoCal, we can do that. Here's the budget. You go take a look at what we can buy. Yeah. And that didn't sit very well. So I said, look, if you want to go to Denver, maybe I could get a job in the training center. And I kind of had a thought of, well, I'd be an evaluator at some point. And so and she has some family here. So we came out and looked, and she really liked it. And so we were moving to Denver, and the line standards manager position on the 737 opened up. And that is basically you manage the line check pilot cadre for the 737. Okay. So I initially applied for that and didn't get it. And then the second time it opened up, I applied and got that role. And so I was under flight standards for a fairly short period of time. And then there was a reorganization where the line check pilots moved over to training. Okay. And so I went from a line standards manager to a line training manager. And that was about 3 years ago.
Was there much change in the function of that role, or was it just named something different? From standards to training.
Exactly. There's some consternation about that. I mean, honestly, there's people that are upset about it, or they think that the quality is different. I'm really proud and happy about my relationship with Rob Thomas and Flight Standards. We talk every day. We get along really well. He is a brilliant man with a really good head on his shoulders, and a great leader who I learn a lot from. And Rob and I really see eye to eye on a lot of things, and we're very, very focused on the quality of the people that we train and the quality of the people that work for us, and what we're putting out there, and the safety of the operation. And so for me, that relationship is extremely healthy between training and standards. So organizationally, it makes no real difference to me whether the line check pilots or who's under what structure. Effectively, the work is the same. But Rob's done an incredible job of sort of revamping what standards looks like, and we've done a lot of work together in the last year in that regard. Okay.
And so today he's the managing director of standards, where you are the managing director of training, flight training.
Correct. That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay. And this will actually shed a little light. What is your primary focus in your role versus, say, Rob's in his role? So a little more than just the word standard and training.
I will tell you that as a line pilot for all these years, I knew that there was a managing director of training, and that there was a managing director of standards. I knew who they were. I had no idea what they did, and I have no idea where that is in the org chart and the structure. So The managing director of training, which is me, my job is a little bit twofold. It's the first is I am responsible for all of the flight training program at United, the development and implementation of flight training. Part of that is managing all of the flight instructors, the evaluators, the FTIs, the line check pilots, and the QCLs. And then, so there's about 2,400 of those folks running around doing training for United. The other function that I have is, curriculum development. So the course length, what we put in the course, what are our training initiatives, what are we focused on? If we change, the structure of a training course, or we add a sim, or we move a sim, or we have to develop something like UPRT. That all falls under my purview. Our AQP program that we run our training under is my responsibility. And lastly, I'm in charge of the simulators. So all 70 sims and counting. We'll be at 86 or 84 this time next year. And then the training center itself. So 7 buildings, 750,000 square feet. I'm responsible for that facility. So I like to tell my team, and I tell you, I've got a really good team of people that are experts in every piece of that I rely on heavily. But we are our own little airline over there. I mean, we actually, instead of airplanes, we have simulators, and we run a small airline. And Rob's job is the managing director of standards, and I think you should have him on, and he'll tell you in much more detail. But implementing policies and procedures of how United flies airplanes. That's the fundamental role that he does, is make sure that the policies and procedures of how we fly airplanes is sound and relevant and with an eye on safety. He was the managing director of safety before this job that he's in now, and bringing that over is really helpful because he's got such a great background in a lot of that work.
Okay. Yeah. Bringing safety into standards certainly makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Okay. So you and I have been here you've been here about a year longer than me. But you and I have both seen training periods where we're booming forward, where we're not moving at all, to where we're booming backwards. Obviously right now we're in one of those forward moving, we're bringing in pilots of all certain experience levels from various backgrounds, from regionals, corporate, military, a mix thereof. What are the challenges you guys are facing kind of in the day-to-day with this volume of training going on? What are the biggest challenges right now in the training center? Just on volume alone, I guess I should say.
Yeah. So it's an interesting industry, as you know, and anybody that's following that, is kind of new to the industry, buckle your seatbelt, because as soon as you think you've got it figured out, you don't have it figured out. Something's going to change. And we're in a period of flux right now, but in the general trend, things are, they're not vertical anymore, but they're at a really good steep angle of growth and climb. We'll hire, it literally changes weekly, but I mean, I think we're going to end 2024 having hired around 1,375 pilots. That was down from about 2,100 was the initial plan. And you go, oh, that's disappointing, 1,375 pilots. 1,375 pilots before 2 years ago had never been done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we hired 23 and 2,400 pilots in 22 and 23. And so it's, half of that, but it's still an incredible amount of hiring and training. And we went from, an operation of 30 sims to we're going to be at 84. It's just a massive, massive change. The challenges with that, and I'm really careful when I talk to my team about making sure that I put this in context. And guys like you and I that have been here a while and watched things go well and not go well, I always want to make sure that I frame this up as, hey, you're going to run into some problems as we do these jobs, and you're going to run into some challenges that we need to overcome and think through. But these are opportunities, man. These are not real problems. A problem was 4 years ago when you and I woke up and 97% of our revenue went away.
Right.
And I remember April 2020, I was flying out of San Francisco as a senior 737 captain, 350 of us on the bid. And I opened up the bid sheet and there was one trip for the month.
Yeah.
That's going away. Like, that's not, oh, it's going to be a tough downturn. You're going to cease to exist as an airline.
Yeah.
And I know Scott's been on your show, and he's talked about the deal that he made with ALPA, which, you know, people give Insler a lot of who was the MEC chair at the time. They give him a lot of grief, but without that deal, we would not be where we are today, because it allowed us to keep from furloughing anybody, and it allowed us to keep from parking any fleet types. So when we started coming out of COVID, we accelerated really fast. And that's why we are where we are today. And the government came in and helped us with some money, and they were smart and they raised money ahead of time. But you look at that, and then you look at the problems that we have right now.
Right.
I'll take these all day long. Right.
Yeah.
So, but there's still things for us to pay attention to and to overcome. And even within the last 6 months, the market's completely changed. So we are, you know, with what's going on at Spirit, I mean, the third quarter is not out yet, but you and I both know the Spirit numbers in the third quarter are bad.
Yeah.
And so I think people are starting to see it over there. So our applicant pool from Spirit is huge. Same with Frontier. And these were the darlings of the industry just a few short years ago.
Right.
So we've now got, you know, just our hand pick any 20,000 hour Spirit pilot you want. They're applying. What is interesting to me, and we went from with United Next in this growth plan, we were going to be trucking along at this really normal training cycle of just constant training all the time. With the slowdown in deliveries from Boeing, we're getting back into this peaky cycle of training. So we didn't hire anybody in May, June, and the first 3 quarters of July.
In the company or in the training center on this?
In the training center.
Okay.
We're growing really fast, you know, in the winter months to get ready for the summer. And then in the summer, our training load goes to near zero.
Yeah.
From a staffing perspective, it's miserable because, you know, I've got to staff for the peak, and then there's a whole nother, you know, job share opportunity that the FAA struggles with understanding. So, but we, you know, our biggest problem right now, we were having a hard time attracting qualified people to do the work as a flight instructor or as an LCP or as an evaluator. The new contract has really changed that. The work is compensated, I think, fairly, but very lucratively.
Yeah. And
it becomes a much more attractive job.
Yeah.
And as soon as you settle any labor dispute, people are now willing to help more.
Yeah. Let's hit that real quick. What are you guys looking for in a PI? If
great question.
Line pilot out there that's interested, maybe moving to Denver, becoming a PI. As a matter of fact, my co-pilot I just flew with this week. She and her husband are both United pilots. Kind of talking about maybe going out there. He was a sim instructor at their regional. So, what are you guys looking for in a potential? Let's just start with PI.
Yeah, great question. First thing is a really good communicator, right? I mean, you've got to have good communication skills. You've got to be able to adapt to the changing situation and meet people where they are. And that just sort of goes in life. What I'm looking for selfishly is I want somebody who really wants to be an instructor, that really like to teach. They really are passionate about what we're doing. They are on board to give 110%. They're going to go above and beyond for the pilots that we train, because that's our customer.
Right.
And I really want to make sure that they are in it for the right reasons. They're not just, you know, they're not just here because it's convenient. Look, it's a really good job.
Yeah. No,
you have a lot of time off. You're
and
home
making
every
some
night.
good money now.
It's a good job.
Yeah.
And I want people that are here because they're passionate about teaching, and they want to see the light bulb go on, and they want to have our pilots, you know, they want to be part of that growth. And I also want somebody that is not afraid to have a crucial conversation.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to say, this is not going well. I'm going to give you everything that I can to make it better. And I'm going to use all the resources I've got. But at the end of the day, if it's not going well, it's not going well. And I will tell you to your face why I think it's not going well, what you need to work on. But we are going to hold the standard.
Yeah.
We're not going to let people through that shouldn't be getting through.
Do they need to be previous instructors in the military or previous airline or life? No.
I mean, it helps. It certainly helps, but we're, you know, we do a pretty thorough interview process, and we're looking for personalities. Look, the other thing is you need to have a really strong training history here.
Yeah.
If you haven't done well in training here, put some distance between whatever that trouble is and get really good at what you do. And you need to have a really good work ethic. I mean, we want people that are going to show up and have done the studying and done the preparation,
Right.
and don't need me to spoon feed you stuff like they're self-starters and they want to go. But you don't need previous experience.
What about for LCP? Someone interested, do they need to have been in the training environment before?
Nope.
Or just a good history with the company, good training record, recommendations? What does that look like?
Yep. All of that. So good training for an LCP, good training history is paramount. I will tell you that the FAA has, I mean, they go all the way back in your history, and they'll ask questions about any accidents or incidents, or if you had a violation. Then it becomes almost out of our hands. We want to hire you. The FAA says, I'm not going to give them a letter. So we work through that process. If there's somebody that had a DUI 20 years ago that shows up, we have a process in place with the FAA where we can kind of present our case that we want to hire this person based on time between events and what they've learned from that. And the FAA will give us some relief there. It starts with being really, really technically good. You know the book cold, you know the airplane cold, you know the FOM cold. And those things matter because when somebody asks you a question, it really feels terrible not to have the answer. And then we want people that have that base level of knowledge, because what we'll teach you is how to be a line check pilot, how to save the airplane when things aren't going well, how to fly again from the right seat if you haven't done it in a while. But what we don't teach you is how to study the book.
Yeah.
Like we expect you to come in and on day one, you know everything in the book, in the manual. So having that baseline knowledge, and again, being a really good communicator, it's kind of the same criteria, being willing to have a face-to-face conversation, willing to uphold a standard without wavering, and being somebody here's the other thing, you and I have been through a lot of training with a lot of line check pilots. And I tell this story a lot at IE Induct with our new instructors evaluators. I remember my first LCP here from almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, me too.
I wish I could tell you it was for the right reasons. Like,
yeah,
people are going to remember you forever.
Yeah.
And so we want people that are going to provide that good work ethic, really support the pilot they're with, and be somebody that they enjoy the time with, not just technically good, but just a good person.
Yeah. There's one LCP United I've worked with more than once because I kept asking for him. Like,
right.
Really great. Not only a good person, but so prepared, not only knowing the airplane, knowing the SOP, but the environment operationally, he was fantastic. And so, yeah, you're right. You probably don't remember the ones that were just fine. You remember the ones for the good reasons and the bad reasons, like you mentioned. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah. All right. So PI, LCP standards, as far as, and I guess this maybe falls more under Rob's purview, but if someone's wanting to be a standards captain, what are you guys looking for? Is that under Rob's purview, or is that under yours?
No, it's under mine too. So the standards captain is not a thing anymore. We call them evaluators.
Okay.
That's under my purview. But so where Rob's team comes in is they own the QC program. So all the LCPs that are QCLs, they kind of serve dual masters, right? So they serve flight training as an LCP. When they're doing QC work, they're working for flight standards. Evaluators work for flight training, and they work for the FAA. So kind of the same thing, right? We're looking for, it's a consistent theme of things that we are, again, technical expertise. Those jobs, they pay really well. And so they've become really competitive, which is great, particularly on the wide body front, because look, you're giving a type ride to somebody on behalf of the FAA. You are type rating them in the aircraft that they now can go fly anywhere in the world. And so you need the evaluation skills of how to get and creating an environment that people are relaxed in is the other thing. We don't, the days of we're not really into that. We want people that are going to give people the best chance to succeed.
Tell me if this is something under your purview, under Rob, somewhere else. I know, I've been here long enough to know that anytime you change a procedure, regardless how small, it is a pretty paramount event. Like an example, PWS off, right? That's a new item on our checklist, our parking checklist on the 67. What does it take to get that done? Where does that start? Where does it end? But what we always have made fun of, me and you, before you went to that building, is changes like that. Like, really, we're going to go through all this process for a change like that. What does that take, you know, to do a change on even something simple like our checklist? How long a process is that? Who's got to put their rubber stamp on it, and what does that involve?
That's really Rob's purview on changing policies and procedures. And so I don't want to even kind of guess at that because I'll get it wrong.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is, and the things that we work on together are when we talk about something like, I'm going to use check path as an example.
Right.
So when we come up with something like that, which is a new thing at United in the last year that is founded in Flight Path First, and it's basically a distraction management tool if you're not a United pilot. And what it is saying, hey, what we're really good at, and this is where we came up, we didn't just make this up.
Right.
This comes from safety data, and it comes from work at the FAA under Advisory Circular 120-123, showing that there are some deficiencies in how we fly airplanes in manual flight operations, pilot monitoring, energy management, automation management. Those are the 4 pillars of AC 120-123. We take it a step farther as we're looking at our own safety data. And one of the reasons why I actually, when I got into this role, in the director role, prior to the managing director role, I asked flight safety, the way we do FSIs is per the contract. We have people that are representing of each group on these calls. We do the investigation. A small group breaks out. They put together a corrective action training plan for the crew if there's been an incident, and they put them back into service. And the representatives are from everything from ALPA, the ERC, the FAA, standards, safety, and training.
Mm-hmm.
And the training representative was the senior manager of the fleet. So when I was a senior manager of the 737 fleet, I sat in on all the 737 FSIs. And I could see everything that was going on, and I would kind of get a picture of what's going on in the operation. But I can't talk about it, right? So if there's an event on the 787, I have no idea that happened. And the 787 team has no. So I asked them, I said, hey, I don't want to take away the expertise of the senior manager in the role who's there to provide the training. Could we add a managing director or director level person from flight training that sits on all of them?
Right.
It doesn't need to be, it's not about me. It's not that I'm some genius. Yeah. It's about somebody from flight training should have
the continuity,
the aperture.
Yeah.
And they graciously agreed to allow us to do that. And so I sit on all the FSIs. Rob sits on all the FSIs, or my director does. And in that process, we started to see a common theme. And the common theme was, on the bottom end of things, regular everyday distractions were really good. So you can taxi with somebody talking in your ear and doing a checklist. On the top end of the distraction list of things that can go wrong, a TCAS event, a JIPWIS event, a UPRT event, we're really good. We train it. They're simple. They're repeatable. We emphasize it. It's this middle ground where something happens and you get distracted, but it's a little insidious, and it's not something you see every day. It's a go around where the flaps are not at 30, they're at 15 already. And now you're trying to figure out, okay, well, that's not my normal cadence. I don't do go arounds a lot anyway.
Yeah. We
get into a lot of upsets out of those. So the SA starts to come down and people start to lose focus on the flight path of the aircraft. So check path was a way for people, when they start to recognize that the SA is starting to decrease, to say check path. And there are certain steps: pitch, power, path. I know that I'm going to focus on the pitch of the airplane. Is it appropriate for the phase of flight? Power of the aircraft, same thing, and the path of the airplane. And we came up with that and implemented it. And that took about 1.5 years of work to make sure we ran it through an SRA, safety risk assessment. We go through all the steps. We have experts look at it. We run it through ALPA. We run it through the FAA. We run it through the training committee. We run it through all of these groups. We test it. We run it through our line check pilots, instructors, and evaluators at the annual training standards meeting before we put it out. And then we watch it go out there in the world, and we put it into the manual. And we've already seen some incidents of it. Actually, I've seen it in a couple of FSIs and a couple of sim events where it has saved the trajectory of the aircraft and kept it from going into an undesired aircraft state. And I hear that, people make fun of it and it's a big joke. And I love that because it means people are talking about it.
Yeah.
And it
sure.
means that it's on the top of your mind. And so I love that it's become a little bit of a meme, like, when somebody goes off on a rant or something and it was like, check path.
Yeah.
I love that. To
Yeah.
me, it's a win. So from a training perspective, that's how we sort of get into things. It's and it's the same with any policy procedure change. And I think Rob's been really intentional about making sure we minimize those because it becomes its own distraction, right? And it needs to be routed in. It's usually based in a safety event or events.
Sure.
That's usually what's driving those.
Yeah, it's not somebody just made it up one day.
Yeah,
you're seeing a trend in FSI, right?
You hope not. And in the past, that's possible that was true. And I'm not, I mean, somebody comes into a job and they want to make a name for themselves, or they've got an opinion of how something should be done differently. And we're really, I know Rob is really working on going away from that and just rooting it in good safety risk management data.
It's called an evidence-based program, right? You're using data to come up with a policy. And look, I will say that probably the best thing that has come out of the training center, one of the best in my career, is our routine briefing of go-arounds. Yeah. And whether I caused it myself, ATC, or, flying with somebody and we've had to go around, so much better than they were previously in our career, just because we talk about it at least, once a trip when you're flying. So it's, I think that's been huge. Flare, is that going to be a thing?
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about this one too. And I know this one's making the rounds as well. And so I'm going to ask you a question. The book says I can flare between 20 and 30 feet, and your airplane is slightly different. How do I pick?
Sure.
How do I pick? I mean,
I pick based on descent rate. I pick based on available. I pick based on my current airspeed. It's not a pick, it's a reaction more than anything. So that's why I think it's kind of hard about, and we'll get some guidance, I'm sure, but how to brief something that can happen in so many different ways. Right.
Yeah. And what's good about it, here's just so everybody's aware, this is coming out of new training that we're implementing from FedEx. And FedEx brought this training it's called PMR, Perception Monitor Response. FedEx brought this training about a decade ago to their pilots because they kept crashing MD-11s and they ended up with a fatal one in Narita. Right. Experienced pilots that it's a hard airplane to fly. Sounds like a 737, right? Or a 757-200 versus 767-400, which you fly. And there's some challenges, like the airplanes handle differently. Your airplanes all handle differently in the derotation. And we keep seeing safety data showing us, we've had 63 tail strikes since 2017 at between $3 and $5 million a piece. And
what does that look like though historically? Is that a significant increase? Is that a minor? I mean, I remember a guy in Dulles like 20 years ago that broke an airplane. So like, I know it's not new, but is there a significant uptick?
It's a reasonable uptick. The 57 has a much higher 57-67 fleet has a much higher rate, and the 737 has a much higher volume. And it's trying to combat that we've gotten this extra day of training in. And what the extra day of training does is, and the other piece is the pilot monitoring piece, right? So this is another big, perception monitor response training. It's about getting people comfortable, particularly in the beginning of learning how to fly, but it applies during CQ as well, is getting a set of tenets and rules for how to effectively land the aircraft. It's going kind of back to basics, which you may not have thought about in a long time. When's the last time somebody told you, hey, as you cross over the numbers, shift your aim point to the end? You just sort of do it instinctively. Right. But when we see people that start spotting the deck, and very experienced people spotting the deck for whatever reason, it's just putting these fundamentals back into play. And the flare height one is very interesting to me. I'm a big proponent of it, and I think it's going to do well. And I get it, again, I'm glad people are talking about it. But the intent of that is twofold. The first is, on the 737, I'll tell you, which is I fly by choice.
I did too, by the way, for a couple of years.
Yeah, I have. Well, one, it's easy, and I can get 2 landings anytime I need to. But well, there are people that land that airplane without flaring. Like they just get in the ground effect, and somehow magically we land. Yeah. And then there's people that at 35 feet are kind of milking it down. As a pilot monitoring, I have no idea what you're going to do. Yeah. Because you haven't told me. So if we're coming through 20 feet and you haven't flared, I'm just assuming as a pilot monitoring that you're a 10-foot flare and it's going to all work out at the end. But what we see in the data is we had a guy literally rip the entire tail skid off the airplane because he's like, I usually flare at 20 feet and I was tired and I just got late. And the other guy's along for the ride because he has no idea when you're going to flare.
Yeah.
And so, and there's also a lot of people, you had a good answer to the question, which is, when do I flare? It's a conditional thing, right? It is you are not going to flare, or you shouldn't flare at the same height when you are going into Denver with a tailwind at max landing weight than you should going into Dulles with a headwind in a light airplane, because it's a descent rate, right? If the rate of flare is the same, it's a math problem, and you need to be flaring 10 feet higher. And so just having that, it's a 2 to 3 second brief that says, hey, the conditions today, I'm going to flare around 30 feet. Or today, we're hot, we're heavy with the tailwind, I'm going to flare at 30 feet versus sometime I'm going to flare at 20 feet. And then the pilot monitoring at least has an idea and can be helpful that if you're late or you miss it, that, okay, that I'm going to at least say something. And you as the pilot flying, to create the shared mental model, look, if I come down and I've gotten shallow at the end and I need to keep coming down, obviously that's going to change every single, I'm not going to flare at 27.5 feet,
right?
Because I briefed it. I'm going to flare when it's time to flare based on what the actual conditions are.
Yeah.
And having that conversation of, I'm coming through 30 feet and I know that I'm going to flare later than I thought. Hey, I'm going to come a little down. Now you at least know what I'm doing so that you're available. And it'll, as I said to the team when we introduced this is the first chapter in a book we're never going to stop writing.
So just so we understand the process, when did the first meeting where we said, okay, we need to do something with briefing flare, for example, or was it, hey, how can we try and work on these problems in a roundtable? Someone finally comes up with, why don't we start briefing flare? So how long ago did that happen? And then when are we going to start actually seeing this in the training center? So just so we have a timeline, an idea how this works.
About 6-7 months ago, we were looking at our safety data with tail strikes, and this is what really started it. And Rob and I were sitting around talking about, look, we got a problem here. We've got to stop wrinkling airplanes. We got to stop having landing accidents. And it's not just the tail strike. It's at-risk landings. The numbers have gone up.
Right. We've seen nose steer hitting in 7.5.
We just can't. We can't just sit there and go, oh, gee, I wonder if it'll fix itself. Right. So then you look at, okay, well, why are we doing that? And we started looking at some reasons why. We started focusing. It all comes down to flight path management. And so we were talking, with our industry connections, and we talked to our FedEx guys, and they're saying, hey, look, when we had similar stuff, a lot of at-risk landings on the MD-11, we started doing this training, and we've been working on it for a decade. So Rob and I went down to Memphis. They very kindly put us through the sim, through the brief and through the sim. And they brief at flare height. And I will confess to you, I never even thought about it. I never even thought about, well, why would I, am I going to change intentionally? Am I going to change when I flare based on conditions? I'm like, I come down there and I flare, and I don't tell the other guy what I'm going to do. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, that makes just so much sense. It makes so much sense. From all the things that we see in the industry, like pilot monitoring is one of the tenets of the AC 120, 123. And in the landing phase, the pilot monitoring is just sitting there. They have no idea what's going on. So we took that training, and in 1 4-hour sim session, I was like, okay, I can fly an MD-11. Like the perception monitor response of all the things that, come in and what I'm looking for, how I flare, how I do a balanced landing. And a lot of that training that you'll see at United is also kind of the same intervention training that we do with our LCPs, is how do I recognize when a landing is going bad and make sure that I call the go around and what to do in a balanced landing so I don't try to save a bad position or damage the aircraft like they did in Narita. So we took the training, we finished it, and we said, that's the best sim training we've ever had. And I've got, Alan, I got 12,000 hours as a captain at United, and I really took it to heart. So we brought it home. We had lunch with Scott, Toby, and Ankit. Just so happened they're at the training center. We were in another room. Rob was in another room with the Boeing team talking about tail strike data that we were getting worldwide. And I'm in the other room having lunch with those guys because they're at the training center. And we were talking about this idea. And they said, what do you need? And I said, I need another day of training. And Scott said, okay, that was it. To get a multi-million-dollar extra day of training to 2 fleets, that tells you a lot about how your CEO feels about safety. And it was a 5-minute conversation. So we developed it in the last 4 months. We had a really senior instructor on the 7.3 and the 7.56 that put together. We sent them to FedEx. We took a whole team down to FedEx. I actually ran into at FedEx, interestingly, is one of my childhood best friends I hadn't seen in 40 years. I walked into the room and there he is. I'm like, oh my God, dude.
He was a pilot for FedEx?
Pilot for FedEx. He was a manager on the MD-11. Couldn't believe it. I still get goosebumps thinking about it, but small industry. But so they went down, they did this and they adapted. FedEx was really great. They opened their doors to us. We've helped them with some AQP challenges they had, really good industry collaboration. And we went to school on what they've done. We've adapted it to United a little bit. We have developed it to the point now where we're doing train the trainer on the people that are going to teach this training. Okay. We have trained it with the first half of the line check pilots, instructors, evaluators at the annual training standards meeting. The second half we'll get it in end of October. And I'm really excited about where it's going to be. People will get over the flare height thing. And I've been expecting people to, FedEx warned us, you're going to have adoption problems from people that have been flying airplanes for a long time and don't want to be told what to do. And it's not about telling you what to do. It's about trying to make us a safer airline in general. And we'll get through this together. And I think that when it evolves and matures into good quality training that we can, it'll be mostly aimed at people that are transitioning to a new airplane, but not exclusively. Because I think the tenets and the rules are really good. And the data is showing us that we need to make some improvements there. So that's kind of how that all came to be. You'll see it in January. That new day of training on the 7.3 and the 7.56 will be day 0. Full flight sim 0 will be this day of training. In CQ, you'll see it probably end of next year. And it'll be probably just an hour of just talking about, like, the first lap around the pattern is going to be with just airspeed. That's it. Yeah. And the pilot monitoring have a full set of instruments, and you're going to fly, and you get to the point where you go, you tell me when you're on a 3-degree glide slope, you're not going to have any PAPI. And when you get there, we freeze the sim, we show you where we're at. We'll do it from 1,000 feet, 500 feet. Can you see where we are without the aids? And are you visualizing it? And then hover demo at like 10 feet. And here's the pitch attitude for normal. Here's the pitch attitude for flare, and getting that feel. And then for your fleet, it's the derotation, is a big thing. Like, hey man, they all do different things when you touch down, right? One wants to pitch up, one wants to pitch down. Right. And making sure that we get that really soundly in our pilots' minds of that these airplanes, like we need to follow a process to make sure that you're every single day that you're, handling the airplane correctly, regardless of whether you're in a 57-200 or 67-400.
And that's it. I mean, you could fly the 7.52, 3, 6.73, and 6.74 all in 1 month. So, that's right. Put in the context you've put it in now, I understand it. Like it makes sense, especially on our fleet, but also I'm going to say it, also on the Guppy, the 700, the 800, the 900, right? You've got all 3 variants of the airplanes. Yep. So they're not going to see any of this on the Airbus 777 or 7.8?
They will. They'll see it in CQ. They're not going to get an extra day of training on it yet. In my opinion, at some point, the first day of full flight sim on all the fleets will look like PMR. It'll evolve to that. Whether I have the safety data to generate the need for an additional day of training, that's up in the air. But I think you'll see it there, and then we'll see some of it in and on all the fleets. And here's why. You're going to see it in the FOM of here's the tenets and rules of the landing. We kind of look at it as a debrief. Mm-hmm. That's what I also liked about it in the sim. It was very much instead of just snapping back to a 3-mile final, having the instructor tell you, well, you didn't do this, go back, snap back. And it's you fly the approach, you land, the instructor brings the iPad up with the tenets and rules of a good landing on it or a safe landing, and says, well, what did you see to the pilot monitoring? What did you see? Could you pick up what we were doing here? Did it work with, And oh, you know why? We had a 40-knot tailwind. That's why we ended up out of the touchdown zone. And did you go around? You know, just kind of getting into those conversations. And then it's much more about analyzing yourself. And then we're doing some work on the back end to give you the tools in an ACARS printout to show you, here's the G's that you landed with. Here's the meat of the flare, what altitude it was. Here's your derotation rate. And do those parameters all fall within the normal range so that you can calibrate what is, where's the sweet spot? And okay, I just landed, this looked really good to me. Here's the data. This backs up what I did. I want to do that again. Or if something didn't work on an at-risk landing, well, why not? I look at the data and go, okay, well, I flared, the meat of the flare was too late. And okay, well, now I remember what that looked like. I'll back that out for the next landing. For FedEx, I mean, it really is helping their at-risk landings go way down. Like they've seen a huge reduction in at-risk landings, particularly on the MD-11. Those MD-11 guys they're not inexperienced. The airplane's hard to fly.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. So
there's been a couple of accidents with the MD-11. They're not the only ones. I think I remember an Asian carrier having the same as well. So, all right. So this is something we'll start seeing next year if we're just doing CQ towards the end of the year. Okay, mine's in February, so I won't see it.
You won't see it yet.
Yeah. Okay.
You'll see it in the FOM though, because there's nothing in the tenets and rules that needs, like, you don't need to train. You can just see, hey, I crossed the threshold. I look long. I pull the power to idle before I touch down. I don't derotate until I'm sure the mains are on the ground. So you'll see that in the source documentation. So it'll just be something, that's out there, so that when you fly with people that have had the training, that you know what they're talking about. They're not just speaking Martian to you.
Okay. Yeah. Last quick question. Let's say the economic environment kind of starts really slowing down and the company's like, hey, it's time to stop hiring. Don't need to let anybody go. The nice thing is, I mean, our biggest retirement year is still 2026. And it's not like we go from zero to a bunch to nothing. We were just hitting a plateau, but we got what, 2,000 people leaving in the next 3 years or something like that, 3 or 4 years. So in your department though, you're going from hiring 1,300, let's say you go to hiring just replacement. So it cuts in half again. What does that look like? How hard is that going to be? How much are you going to be letting go a lot of people in the training ceremony? How hard is that going to be to do?
No, we have a pretty decent, healthy attrition rate. So with people who want to go back and fly the line.
Okay.
And so I have not hired anybody. I hired some 7-3 evaluators, but on the instructor side, I haven't hired anybody in a while. I don't intend to hire anybody for quite a while. Line check pilots, I probably won't hire anybody in 2025 because we're well staffed, because we were staffed for when we thought we were going to get 175 airplanes this year.
Yeah.
Which we got 80 something. So we'll carry that cost a little bit because, and I find good, meaningful work for them to do. This is when you start developing training programs. This is when you qualify a lot of instructors as captains. You do extra work that's good, solid work. But the intent of this is, I don't want to surplus anybody. It's you've moved to Denver to go be an instructor. So unless we have a cataclysmic thing, we'll just absorb that. Because here's the other thing that I'm really bullish on is we can be pretty nimble and aggressive with some of our staffing as an airline, because we have the biggest training center on the planet.
Yeah.
And that is a competitive advantage that nobody else has. So when things either don't go well or we get an opportunity to swing fast, we can do it because we've got all sorts of training capacity.
Right.
Well, it doesn't do me any good to have training capacity if I don't have instructors.
Yeah.
So we are the shock absorber for all of the changes. And so we are ready, and that makes sense to people, that it makes sense to be prepared for the changes. Because even, remember this, even if we do a downturn, that downturn generates a lot of training.
Right. Oh yeah.
So we're busy when we're going up. We're busy when we're going down.
Right.
And so I like to keep the staffing healthy so that we can, my answer when people say, can we go fly this? I want it always to be yes.
Yeah.
Like I never want it to be, I told them when I interviewed for this job, my goal is that I will never be the person that keeps us from going and taking care of the flying opportunity, because we're not in position. I just don't ever want to be out of position.
Sure. Lastly, personal note, that's one of your pictures behind you.
Yeah.
So guys, I'm just going to say it, little Miles Morgan, photography.com. he's got some amazing
Yeah.
photographs. Your dad was a professional. I've known you for almost 20 years, and yeah, really cool work. If you guys are interested in really cool photography, not just a
Thanks,
guy
man.
running our training center. So, all right.
Thanks,
hang out.
Alan. Good
Great
to
to
see
you,
you,
brother. Yeah.
Thanks
for your
everybody.
time.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.